Hi everyone. So I'm very excited because of all the interviews or footages that I've collected so far. I mean, I've met a lot of wonderful people, icons in the hobby, but perhaps no one is more iconic than this gentleman
Oh, I don't think so.
seated next to me, Mr. Rob Watts, who's DACs. We have a bunch of us, and all of us would have known by now, would have heard of by now. Rob, I just wanted to catch you and just have you sort of talk to my viewers about
Sure.
some of the innovation that is in store, because when we hear of Chord, we do look forward to a lot of the most innovative products in the industry. So what's coming up, and if you want to take us through some of the newer stuff that we can expect to see in the coming months and years.
So what we've got that's coming up is the new scaler to match Dave.
The Dave Scaler.
The Dave
so
Scaler.
Rumors are true.
The rumours are true.
Awesome.
John Franks leaked the information, so I can talk about it.
Sure.
So
Is it the same sort of form factor as the Dave?
It's exactly the same form factor as a Dave. Okay. So that in itself is causing me headaches. Because of power dissipation and heat dissipation issues, but that's another story.
Sure.
So the prototype I've been listening to for about the last 2 years, and I'm in the process of fine-tuning it, matching it to the metalwork, changing the PCBs, and getting that right.
Sure.
So we kind of hope that by the end of this year we'll be launching it.
Okay, wonderful. End of this year.
Hopefully, but I would say touch wood, but this isn't wood.
This isn't wood, but touch marble, what have you. Yeah.
So
it's going to have more taps than...
It's certainly going to have more taps. It's one of the benefits, or the only benefit I had with COVID, was the fact I had 2 years where I wasn't running around.
Sure.
And could spend a lot of time on fundamental research.
Thinking through,
things through, listening to things, measuring things, trying things out. And so this program has been going on since 2018.
Nice.
So there's a lot of work that's gone into it. One of the things that worried me was the questions I was asking myself was, how many taps do we need before we've perfectly reconstructed things?
Sure.
And
can you share with us how many taps this new product will be, or approximately?
No, I can't. Okay. I would, but
cool.
because of thermal considerations,
sure.
It might be a little bit larger, it might be a little bit smaller. I don't want to give a number. It's substantially more than what we've got with the Mscaler, that's for sure. But what's more important is what else has gone into it, because it's not just about taps.
Sure.
It's about the algorithm itself.
Okay. Yeah. Of course.
And I've been spending a lot of time researching into why these things are important. And how we can improve upon it, and how many taps do we need to get the ultimate sound.
Sure.
And it turns out to be an awful lot.
Okay.
A huge amount. So answering these questions and solving them, it's been really fascinating.
Amazing. So in terms of the sound signature these devices impart, the Mscaler for me, the Dave, as precise and as revealing as it is, just added a lot of naturalness, if I may use that expression, to the Dave. So, for example, there was an even greater sense of spaciousness. There was a slight, I think, change in timbre.
Yep.
For me, for my preferences, it was just a very welcome change as well, as great as the Dave is.
You mean a little bit warmer?
A little bit warmer, perhaps. Smoother, warmer, what have you.
Yep.
So what about this new Dave
Scaler?
So
I think it's got all of those things again, but the quality that most draws to you is timbre variation, and the improvement in timbre variation is immense.
It's immense.
Yeah, it's not a small change.
Okay, that's amazing.
I'm really excited about that.
It's amazing. So we have the Mojo 2 here.
Yes.
Which is a very cute little device. I've tried this. Very impressive performance for the price.
This is where I fail and not manage to get the thing. We go.
Yeah. So a lot of people know already, the Mojo was a classic. The Mojo 2 is, by all accounts, even better. I've heard it, and I can verify that it's even better with very amazing EQ. And perhaps, Rob, you want to talk a bit about the EQ functionality?
Yeah, so this is also another thing that happened during COVID. Actually, this happened slightly before COVID, Everybody knows about, with Dave, the reason that Dave is so much more transparent with much better depth perception is about small signal accuracy. And before Dave, I used to work on the basis that noise shapers, which are an essential part of a Delta Sigma DAC, noise shapers only needed to be 200 dB performance. That's 32-bit accuracy. So that means in the audio bandwidth, you've got 200 dB distortion and noise, so pretty low. I couldn't imagine that you would need better performance than 200 dB, because no one can hear at 200 dB. But the crazy thing about Dave was that when I started playing around with the noise shaper, I tested my assumption that 200 dB was good enough. And I listened to a 220 dB noise shaper, and you got better depth. And then I went from 220 to 240, 280, and eventually I hit 350 dB. And even when you were going from 330 to 350 dB, which is just crazy numbers, you could still hear a change in depth. So that led me to just, as a requirement for a digital module, must be able to reproduce minus 301 dB perfectly. With absolute, within 0.001 of a dB amplitude.
0.001, okay.
Accuracy. So that's a formal spec, and any module I do has got to pass that test. Otherwise, it's not transparent. And I've done lots and lots of listening tests since coming up with this, and every single time it fails a listening test, it'll be because it's failed the 301 dB. So it's proved to be something really useful. But you mentioned earlier about when you had the Mscaler, the depth got better, and it opened up.
I thought so, yeah.
And that was really weird, because depth to me, before the Mscaler, was only about amplitude, getting the amplitude correct, so that your very, very ultra small signals have the correct amplitude. And by having the filter changing, which never happened before on a WTA filter, when I increased the tap length, it never changed in terms of soundstage depth. You get changes from left to right lateral imagery, but never in terms of depth. So that led me thinking, well, this means that timing is important for depth perception. So timing means phase. So I then started to look at the phase shift of a small signal against a large signal.
Interesting, okay.
And I found that there was a difference in digital circuits, in that very, very small signals, and particularly if you're filtering, you'll get a phase shift, and then that phase shift will change when it becomes a small signal. So it's like you've got a really tiny, tiny signal, and the DSP cannot resolve that signal, and the filter stops functioning as a filter. So you get a phase shift. And I could do listening tests where I had noise shapers that had a phase shift error, and when you removed that phase shift error, the depth got better. That then led me to latch on to, well, the thing about phase shift is that you've got a huge phase shift when you're using EQ.
Absolutely.
Because that's what you're doing. When you're changing the frequency response, you're changing the phase as well. And that led me to think, right, what we needed to do, if we want a completely transparent EQ, would be to be able to have this minus 301 dB performance in amplitude and in phase. And so I spent a couple of years working on how to get a DSP core to work so that it passed this test. And eventually I came up with a solution. So that's why the DSP core inside here is 104 bits. And it's running at 768 kilohertz. So it's running at a much higher rate when it's doing the DSP, in 705 when it's 44.1. And it's noise shaped as well. You have to noise shape it for the thing to work. So the beauty of this is that you get EQ that is transparent.
It is. In fact, I was just talking to some friends of mine about how there are only two devices on the planet that I've heard so far in a similar form factor in which EQ has been life-changing for me. One is the Sony WM1 ZM2 DAC.
Okay.
Great EQ, no introduction of fuzz or volume changes, whatever. And this guy does it in an even smaller form factor.
Yeah.
Which was eye-opening for me.
Yeah, and it's really, really useful, the ability to tune your sound to
you
suit
lift
the
up the
headphone.
sub bass or
Yeah, because
pull
this
the mid-range
was
back.
the problem what I had with Mojo. We wanted to improve the performance, put crossfeed on there, and I think crossfeed is absolutely essential for headphone. And we wanted to get it closer to the sound of the the Hugo 2.
Yeah.
Which meant making it DC coupled, which meant losing the coupling capacitor, and the coupling capacitor is the thing that gave the original Mojo the warmth.
Interesting.
So making it more neutral would make it sound brighter.
Yeah.
And the problem...
It doesn't sound bright though. It sounds more referenced.
No, it's what you've got is you've got the ability of making it sound warmer.
Sure.
If you need to.
Absolutely.
And you've still got that, and yet it's still a neutral if you want it to be neutral.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rob. This is an amazing device, and I dare say it's an amazing device for any price point. But at this price point, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You know what I mean?
And now Chord can make them.
And now Chord can make them.
That's good.
So one last question for you, Rob. Something else is coming out, an even more exciting new kind of a product.
Yes,
after the Dave
Ultima
Scaler.
DAC. The Ultima DAC.
The Ultima DAC?
Ultima DAC.
Ultima
so
DAC.
Chord have got a range of Ultima power amplifiers.
Oh, right, you do. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
for
and the
channel
Ultima
and all,
preamp. So this is the top end, and it'll be quite a substantial unit.
Okay.
So that again is a project I've been working on for a long time.
You've been working on. Can we expect it to come out this year or
not
no?
this year?
Not this year.
It's slated for next year.
Okay.
But COVID, in some senses, was good because I had lots of time to play around with things.
Sure.
And to do things you wouldn't normally do, and to investigate
It's
things.
good for us.
It's great. But getting hold of prototypes was a nightmare.
I can imagine. Thank you for all your trouble, though.
So the prototype took 2 years for them to build.
Oh, wow.
Because the parts weren't available.
Sure.
And
sure.
There's no point in building a
Sure.
prototype that doesn't have the right parts in it. So,
Yeah.
But now I've got that prototype, so I can actually test it out. What I have been doing in the meantime is the coding for the DAC. There are a large number of modules that have been improved, and I know how those actually sound, and it is quite a big improvement.
From the Dave.
From a big improvement from what I've been doing in the past. Yes.
Wow.
So it's not going to be a small change, but then one would hope so, given the price of the unit.
Absolutely. And any sort of indication on what it might sound like in relation to the Dave? Warmer, more resolving, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's more resolving. Timbre variation is one big thing.
Okay.
Another big thing is that sharp attack, being able to hear little sharp, fast events.
Nice. That's exciting.
Which is something that digital doesn't do very well.
Sure.
In fact, analog does very poorly as well. It's a reproduction issue. When you listen to live unamplified sounds, things can sound explosively hard and sharp and fast.
Yeah.
And reproduced audio softens everything.
Sure.
It loses that transparency, it loses that edge. So what we want is the ability to things sound fast and sharp and explosive and rich and warm when the occasion demands. You want it all.
You want it all.
And so a lot of the focus, the improvements I've been making has been on this ability to sharpen things up and make things sound sharper and faster. And with more weight and more density as well at the same time. So it's warmer sounding and sharper sounding. Quite weird. And once you latch on to that sound, it's very, very addictive and distinctive. So Ultima is going to be something really interesting.
Super exciting, Rob. Thank you so much for all your time so far. And thank you mostly for innovating as much as you do, and
Wow.
we hope you never stop innovating.
Me too. That's the only thing that worries me is I don't know what's worse, me running out of new ideas or not having the capability of new ideas, or managing to close the gap so that live sound and reproduced sound, there's no difference, and then my
Sure,
job
sure.
is done and I'll have nothing to do. So, I don't know which
Absolutely.
worries me most.
Well, these are all good worries for us to have. But thank you,
Thank
Rob,
you.
for your time, and hope to catch you again soon.
Yeah, we'll do.